got a
Yeah.
bunch that's a little bit different.
Imagine that you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, rowing across 3,000 miles of water by your own power. I know, sounds like the beginning of a scary movie, right? Well, it's not. It's what my guest, Beau Maier, and a couple of his friends did when they decided we've got to do something, we've got to make a difference, we got to raise awareness. So we're literally going to row across the Atlantic Ocean. And in that extremely difficult journey of 3,000 miles of water, Beau's life would change forever. Can't wait for you to hear about my guest on this episode of Unbeatable, Beau Maier. Hey, before we get into Beau's incredible story of rowing across the Atlantic, you want to do some rowing? You want to do some mountain biking? You want to do some climbing? I'm doing an adventure in Israel on March 17th through the 27th, and I want to invite you. Here's some details about it before we get into this episode. Before we get into the interview for this episode, I want to invite you to go with me on the trip of a lifetime. And that is not an exaggeration. I've spent more than the last year building a tour of the Holy Land that never existed before. This is what we're calling the Unbeatable Adventure, where we're going to rappel, we're going to climb cliffs, we're going to ride mountain bikes through the countryside, we're going to swim in the Dead Sea, we're going to climb trails, we're going to spend nights under the stars and spend days in luxury hotel rooms. We'll be in fishing boats on the Sea of Galilee. This is basically everything that you could want to do with action and adventure in Israel, plus all of the world's great historical sites there. And the dates for this trip are March 17th through the 27th. I want to invite you to come along. We built this trip so no matter where you live in the world, all you need to do is buy plane tickets and show up in Israel on day one. And from there, we pay for and we take care of everything. Hey, if this epic tour sounds like something you're interested in, why don't you go over to Signature Tours and search for the Unbeatable Holy Land Adventure with Jeff Strucker. Starts March 17th and it runs until the 27th. I would love to see you there with me. And now I want you to hear this incredible story, this amazing journey of crossing the Atlantic Ocean with my guest, Beau Maier.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.
Hey, Beau, it is great to get a chance to meet you and to talk with you on this episode of Unbeatable.
Yeah, hi Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for joining in. It's the middle of the winter in South Georgia, which means, 70 degrees right now, literally 70 degrees today in South Georgia. What's it like for you right now?
It's not too bad. Sheridan, Wyoming. It was about 32 below for a week last week, and now it's back into the 40s. So we're doing good.
Thanks, man. I did that on purpose for people that are listening around the world that don't understand U.S. geography. While it's 70 degrees here in Georgia, it can be literally 100 degrees different. And Wyoming, in big sky country, it gets really cold with lots of snow and a hard wind, right?
It does, yeah. Yeah, the wind in Sheridan's usually not too bad, but when it picks up, it'll take it from 32 below to 50 below, just wind chill wise. So
for everybody who's driving and not watching this episode on YouTube, you heard him correctly. He said 50 degrees below zero when that wind starts blowing in Sheridan, Wyoming, which I don't care where you come from on the planet. That's just flat out cold, man.
Yeah, that is, that's cold.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm reading your story. I'm learning more about you, and I am freaking out, to be honest with you, because I joined the Army on purpose. I joined the Army because I don't want to be in the Navy, and I don't want to be in the Navy because I don't want to be on a boat. And this Army veteran that I'm talking to, Beau, decides to get together with a couple of other Army dudes and, hey, let's row across the Atlantic Ocean. 3,000 miles of ocean on a rowboat with just you and a couple of buddies. I just got to say it out loud, man. What the heck were you guys thinking? Or maybe I should say, what were you guys drinking when you came up with this idea? Let's row across the Atlantic.
Right. So, it's interesting. We've been doing it now for a little while, but when it all started, we after getting out of the military and dealing with my own stuff and kind of coming to terms with that, I hadn't really connected with my military buddies. That I had been. I mean, I was in for several years, and it just seemed like when I got out. I think a lot of people do this. You get out and you go do your own thing, and it's almost like I'm done with that now, and I'm going to go do something different. And what I didn't really realize, and I think what I've talked to a lot of my friends about too, is that you can't replace the relationships that you built in the military. It's just there's a bond there that's just you just can't find that with other people, back in your hometown. Not that they're bad people or anything. It's just really difficult to just share that sort of same connection. I mean, it's like something you can do with sitting next to a guy and you don't even have to say anything and things are okay, and so after, dealing with some of my own issues, I guess kind of coming out of the fog, I started to try to reconnect with some of my military friends, and we did, and unfortunately, one of the calls I got back in 2000, I want to say it was 15, late 2015, maybe early 2016, was one of our good friends committed suicide. He was in Killeen, Texas. He was still active, but he had left our unit in the
Fort Hood, Texas.
82nd.
Yeah.
And was a EOD tech. So he left the infantry and went to EOD, and was down in Killeen, and just a great guy. I didn't even, I hate to say it, but I didn't even know he was struggling so bad. And I got a call. We went down there. A lot of people were going to show up to his funeral. People I hadn't seen in a really long time. And I actually drove from Wyoming to Killeen to pick up two of my military friends in Denver, who I hadn't really hung out with very much. And so we could get some window time together. And we drove down there together. And it was a bittersweet, kind of situation because it was horrible, like what was going on down there. But at the same time, reconnecting with everybody was really beneficial too. And so when we left there, Alex Evans, who started Fight or Die with me, one of the guys that started it with me, him and I were we were complaining is what we were doing. We were complaining because somebody needed to help the veterans, and nobody's doing anything about it, or we're not making, people aren't making a big enough effort. But the interesting thing about that is it quickly turned to a conversation of, man, we're not doing anything either. And these are like our friends, and so we kind of stopped complaining about it and started talking about, what we might be able to do. So for the next couple of weeks, we would text back and forth about, oh, what if we did this? And it's like, nah, somebody's already doing that. And finally, Alex calls me one day, and I was sitting in my office, and I'll never forget this because he called me up and he said, hey, you still want to do that thing, like, something to help veterans? And I was like, yeah, man, I'm all about it. What do you want to do? And he was like, I think we should row across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, let me back up. He didn't say that to me at first. He said, do you want to do a rowing race with me? That's all. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. Where are we doing it at? And in my head,
Don't even know what you're getting into.
No, I just
sign me up.
Commit right away, and then we'll figure it out.
That's right. Just like a great warrior, jump in head first and figure it out later.
Right. So yes. I said, where are we doing this at, Alex? And he was like, well, it's across the Atlantic Ocean. And I was like, dude, like
that's a big body of water.
Yeah. So he said, man, I'm going to send you this video that I found and check it out. I watched this video and, I kind of got emotional watching it because I was like, we have to do this. Like, this is something we got to do. So we have no idea what we're doing. We're a couple of guys from the mountain states. We have no business on the ocean.
Needless to say, you're 1,000 miles away from the closest body of water.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it was just me and Alex, and we were like, well, we need 4 guys to do this. I mean, you could do it in pairs, but we wanted to do 4. So for the first couple of months, I mean, him and I were just kind of out there flapping, like trying to figure this out. And it became really clear to me that this is going to take a lot, I mean, that we're going to have to really like work towards this, and we're probably not gonna be able to do it anytime soon. So what if we set a date, that's maybe 2 years out or whatever to try and accomplish this goal? And it was kind of funny because Alex got all mad at, he was all mad at me. He's like, no, we need to go do it right now. And I was like, I don't think it's
Yeah,
possible,
let's just go
Alex.
jump in a rowboat and start rowing by our own power
Yeah.
across the Atlantic with no planning and no training.
Right. Well, and his with what he was telling, he was like, his take on it was, I mean, dude, we've done a lot of crazy things. Like this will be fine. Like we jump out of planes, like we do all this stuff. And I was like, Alex, this is a big deal. And him and I stopped talking for like 2 months. He wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't return my calls, nothing. And finally he called me back and he was like, all right, like I see where your head's at. Let's see what we can do about this. And by the way, in that time, he had called everybody we know military wise, and every guy was like, you guys are crazy. Like, there's no way that I'm doing that. And so, so it was just the 2 of us, and we didn't have anybody else to do it. And we ended up meeting up in Denver. We were both working in the oil field at the time. So we went to this big oil field party, and I pull up next to the bar. This guy's standing there, and he looks over, and I was wearing a KIA bracelet at the time, and he said, "Hey, were you a military guy?" I was like, "Yeah, I was on the 82nd." He's like, "Nice, man." He was like, "I was a ODA commander," and I was like, "Okay, cool." Like, so him and I started talking, and turns out we were in some of the same theaters at the same time, and anyway, we had kind of hit it off right away. Well, Alex pulls in, and he's like, who's this guy? I said, this is Bryant Knight. I was like, I just met him. He was the ODA commander. And Alex looks at him and he goes, no, you weren't. So,
by the way, for the listener, these are 2 guys from the 82nd Airborne Division, a pretty elite unit, talking to a Special Forces commander, telling him, no, you weren't, because you don't look like you're that tough, right?
Yeah. Well, and I didn't think that, but Alex is he's Alex. I mean, so anyway, Bryant's friend basically throws a punch at Alex, and they start fighting each other. And Bryant and I just stand there, never met each other. We're just chatting, and we're like, what are these guys doing, man? Like, this is ridiculous. So kind of gets all situated. And a couple of days later, I was still in Denver, and I had gotten Bryant's number, and I was like, hey, we should go to lunch. It'd be good to meet up at lunch. I'm going to bring Alex. Alex felt pretty stupid about it. So we go to lunch, and we're sitting there eating lunch, and Brian's like, so what are you guys all about, man? And I was like, well, actually, I was curious if you wanted to row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean with us. And he was like, I'm in.
That's a great lunch conversation starter. Hey,
Yeah.
you want to row across the Atlantic? I know I don't know you, and you may be a total psychopath, but you want to row across the Atlantic with me?
Right. So, it was just like instantly he was on board. And so, now there were 3 of us, and we needed a 4th. And it wasn't but a couple weeks later, I used to own an oil and gas construction company, and this guy comes in my door, and he's like, hey man, I was looking to see if you needed another welder. Like, I'm looking for work. And so he sits down, he hands me his resume, and first thing I see on his resume is that he was in 1st Battalion Ranger Regiment, and then he was 1st Special Forces. And his name is Chris Kuntz, and I was like, hey, we started talking about military stuff, and I was like, hey, you wouldn't want to row a boat across the ocean for veterans, would you? And he was like,
Just
Yeah, I
inviting
would do
total
that.
strangers into a very small rowboat with you for weeks or months on the Atlantic Ocean. I love it.
Yeah. So just by chance, we picked up two other guys that were crazy enough to do it with us, and they really wanted to do something to help veterans too. All of us have had our own path out of the military and things that have happened, and then we've also known just so many people that have struggled significantly, and so anyway, the four of us kind of put this thing together, and it really, all we were going to do at first was go row a boat across the ocean, and we weren't going to have an organization or do any of this stuff. But we were laughed out of so many rooms. I can't even, it was crazy. I mean, we'd go in there and we'd tell people what we were doing and what we were trying to do, and they would just like, yeah, you'll never do that, like, you guys are crazy, like, we're not interested to help or whatever. So we were like, okay. So we ended up creating a nonprofit organization because we just thought it might be a little easier to raise money that way. So we were, I don't know, it took a lot of really, really hard work to get to be able to build any of that. But we pulled it off, and we were the we're the first all American veteran team to ever row a boat across the ocean. So
I want to get into just what it took to get to the start line. But before we do that, man, I got this while you're talking, I got this image of like a movie scene beginning, right? And it's four dudes that are in a tiny little vessel, human power, trying to get across the ocean. They're being crashed by waves and storms busting down on them. And all of them are crying out, like, we're all going to die, kind of thing. And then I fast forward, or, you fast backwards just a couple of months, and they're sitting around watching YouTube videos going, this looks cool. This looks like fun. And meanwhile, when you finally get into it, you're like, what the heck am I doing in the middle of a 3,000-mile ocean trying to move across this thing on my own power?
yeah,
And before we're done with this interview, man, Beau, I got to know what happened to you and how your life changed on that ocean. But
yeah, no,
before we
absolutely.
get to that part, man, you already started to talk about it. So let's just get in the weeds on what did it take for four total unknown, zero experience? Hey, we got this crazy idea. Want to support us? Want to give some money? What did it take for you guys to just get this thing, to get started on this epic adventure across the Atlantic?
Well, so none of us knew how to raise money, so that was a whole huge learning experience for
Yeah.
all of us. I still don't think I'm very good at it, but it was, you know, there was a lot of people that once we kind of figured out like what we're really doing, what our mission is, and why, and we just started to talk about it to people over and over and over again. Um, the amount of support that we were given was unbelievable. I mean, people started to back it up. So
When
uh,
you say raise money, how much money did you need at a minimum just to pull this off?
yeah, so we raised about close to 500,000 the first year that
Holy
we did it.
smokes. In 1 year?
Yeah, well,
For
in
real?
about 2 years. So for the first team, I guess, and that's because
Wow.
we didn't have a boat, right? So, and an ocean rowing boat is a unique thing. It's not like you go down to Cabela's and pick out a boat that you're going
Yeah,
to take
you can't go
across
to
the
the
ocean.
Bass Pro Shop and get one of these.
Yeah, exactly. So um, we really wanted to have a boat made in the United States, and there's only one builder in the United States that exists. Her name's Sonia, and she owns Spindrift and lives up in Port Townsend, Washington. And so I got a hold of her and told her what we were doing and what we are all about, and she was like, "Yeah, I'd love to build you guys a boat." So she had her own design, of an ocean rowing boat that we went and checked out. She had a smaller version of it for a pair instead of a four-person boat, and is 100% carbon fiber. And these things they kind of look like little spaceships in a way. I mean, they have it's all solar powered. Water maker on board. all your electronics, your GPS, everything. So, um, and then enough storage to support you for your trip across the ocean. So anyway, we had her build a boat, and it's super expensive. I mean, to do that, and then all of our training and travel to get together to train, and just, I mean, it adds up so fast, and all the gear and the courses. It's kind of fun. All of us are from military units that do a lot of training, and we had a lot of different kind of training between all of us, but none of us had like the proper training to do something like this. So we had some guys, Don Deo, who owns D-Day Defense. He's a good friend of ours, but he's an 18 Delta Special Forces medic, and he has a company that does offshore survival and stuff like that. So he actually came and did a bunch of stuff for us. But it was so, everything's so expensive in ocean rowing. I mean, it's a
I
really
can't
tough
even
thing to
imagine.
raise money for.
Did you have a support, any support along the way? Like, did you have some support vessels, or did you guys go out there on your own?
Yeah, so we it's unsupported. So the race is unsupported, but it is a race. So it is put on. At that time, it was done by Talisker Whiskey and the Atlantic campaign. So Talisker Whiskey was like the title sponsor for the race, and at the time, they were. I think it started in 1997, and they used to do it about every 3 years because that's when they could get enough crazy people together to go do it.
That's when they could find enough
Um,
crazy
and
people
and then
to
it kind
sign
of
up.
yeah, and then it kind of caught wind, and they started doing it every year. I think right around 2013 is when it started to go every year, and so we signed up through them because they do offer, they're a class act. Like the Atlanta campaigns, it's now called the world's toughest row. They're I mean, they're just amazing. They help with everything, to help prepare you or give you guidelines to prepare yourself, I guess. They do offer support, at the start and at the finish, but there isn't like there's no follow on vessel. Once you
Yeah.
once you go,
Once you're out there,
you're on your
you're
own.
out there, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, for the people that are watching on YouTube right now, move your head to the side so that everybody can see those big burly guys that rode across. There it is, a picture of him right behind there. Talisker Whiskey and Atlantic Challenge. I'm assuming this is when you guys successfully completed the Atlantic. Is that what that picture is?
It is, yeah. That's a picture taken right before we got off the boat when we
Yeah.
crossed the
Look
finish.
at the smiles on their faces. And it's because of what you guys just went through, to make your way across the Atlantic and to get to this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always tell people that the hardest part is getting to the start line, and that might seem odd, but it is really difficult to raise money. But it's also, again, we attract guys from, small unit teams, right? I mean, it's a thing, I guess. But um, the so talking about my team in particular, and it happens every year. I mean, I witness it all the time. Every year we do this with new guys, but we're all four type A guys who, have done some things and want to go do this new thing. And it gets tense, because like trying to get all this stuff done and, figure it all out can be extremely frustrating, and everybody has
Yeah.
their own ideas,
Yeah.
and and I don't know why, but we're all, it seems like no matter what, everybody's wired to kind of think that they're going to have a better idea than the people who have done it before them or something. And so we just let them, all right, like go, because we do a lot of training in Mobile Bay down in Alabama, and it's inevitable that after the first couple of times they go out, they come back and they're kind of like, okay, like what are
Now
we
we're
doing?
ready to listen. Yeah. Before that, we weren't, but now we're ready to listen, right?
Yeah. And we had
Yeah.
a hard time with it because we didn't really have anybody that much to show us, this is all new for us. And so, man, like, we, it was, we had some. You have to be very willing to continue to work to be a part of a team when you go do something like this, because you know you just you can't get your feelings hurt, when somebody's upset at you for this or for that. I mean, you got to work it all out, or it just won't work. And but so raising money and trying to train, and dealing with family really also for this whole thing, because it's not a everybody that has ever rode for Fight or Die, including us, they're war veterans, and now they come home. I'll never forget when I told my mom. I was like, Mom, I think I'm gonna row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, and she literally burst into tears, and I was like, what's wrong? And she was like, when are you gonna stop? Like, when are you gonna stop doing things that basically you're like willingly putting your life in danger again, to go do this thing? And I said, Mom, it's really important to me. Like, I I think this is going to make a difference. I really do. I think this can be our part in helping people. And every team that has done this since too, whether it's wives or parents, or siblings, they're up against the same thing where, people are like, man, like this is, but anytime I talk in front of a big crowd, like when it comes to Fight or Die stuff, I tell them like, these guys are willing to put their lives on the line once again for their brothers, which is really special if you think about it. So, but yeah, it's a thing.
What is Fight or Die? Describe that for the audience.
So we we didn't really know what to call ourselves when we were doing all this, and we just kind of started to talk about, the you have a choice. We all have a choice to, and sometimes that choice is really, really difficult to make, no matter what it is that you might be going through. But you can either choose to fight it, or it's going to kill you. And people can interpret that, in their own ways, and it might resonate with somebody other than me different than it resonates with me. But it's just kind of like, not just don't ever quit, don't ever give up. Like you have to keep fighting, you have to keep going, because and and I think Chris Coons once said, like, everybody has their own ocean to cross.
Yeah.
And and I always tell people that you need to live. And I always said to, like, I used to talk a lot about it when we first started this, that I was alive, but I didn't feel like I was living, and that's, I guess, in a nutshell, Fight or Die is all of that. It's, I mean, that's just kind of the name and the phrase that we coined to, like, make it a thing. But it's about digging deep and fixing what you're dealing with. And, and we figured that if we can row a rowboat 3,000 miles across an ocean, that maybe somebody will see that and say, you know what? Like, those guys are out there doing this. Like, I'm gonna get off the couch today, and I'm gonna go. Just, we're trying to motivate people, to
Yeah.
like get help, get fixed, and don't be afraid to like deal with the problems that you have. Don't, like, you can accomplish anything. And we also wanted to show kind of the world that veterans, even though sometimes we may seem broken, like, together we can do some
Oh
incredible
man.
things.
Totally. Yep. Hey, I need to tell you, thank you for all of that you've done for the country. You and I were at the same place at the same time a couple of times when you were in Iraq. In fact, I went to see your boss once when I was there. I was in the Ranger Regiment, but we were operating in your area. And I just wanted to go check in on my old commander, your brigade commander, Colonel Mike Steele, um, who I still have a great relationship with this to this day. But man, for all that you've done for our country and what you're currently doing for veterans now, you were making me think of I struggle to explain to people that have never served in the military, and it's actually not just the military, but it's when you go to war or experience the real hard stuff in the military, the bond that that creates. I struggle to explain that to people that have never gone through what you've been through. So, Beau, my first guest ever on the very first episode of Unbeatable was Kenny Thomas, who was with me in Somalia. And you just described with your mom like the very exact same conversation that I had with my wife, because Kenny called me and said, Jeff, 20 years later, I need to go back to Somalia. And I said, Kenny, are you crazy? Do you know how dangerous Mogadishu, Somalia is the most dangerous city on the planet? And you and I have both been retired or out of the military for a long time. Like, what are we going to do over there? And his comment was basically, and it was this short of a conversation: Jeff, I'm really struggling. I need to go back personally, and I need you to go with me. And I paused for maybe 5 seconds and said, if it's that bad, I'm going. Then I hung up the phone and thought, oh, I got to go tell my wife. And her first words were, when are you ever going to stop putting yourself in, circumstances like this? And she knows me. She knows how deep my love is for the guys and gals that I served with in the military. But even explaining it to her, I couldn't find the right words. Like, how can I explain to you? He needs me, and if he needs me, I'm going to show up and I'm going to help out. And if that means I got to go put my life on the line for him, of course I'm going to do that. Which, for people that have never gone through the experiences you and I have, Beau, that's a little bit hard for them to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
You raised a lot of money. Now, listen, about little over a year ago, I wanted to do something to raise awareness and money like you, to try to help prevent veteran suicide. So I attempted a bike race across most of South Africa and did the best I could to kill myself while I was on that bike. But my real goal was to raise, listen to this, in 11 months' time, I wanted to raise $50,000, and I didn't even get all the way to my goal. And then I'm listening to you, and you brought in $500,000 in about a year or two. And I'm like, well, this dude knows how to raise money. This dude knows how to this dude knows how to let people know just how big the challenge is that veterans are going through, especially 4 or 5 years ago when they were still killing themselves almost 40 a day in the United States. So let's reel the tape back a little bit and go back to that drive to Killeen, Texas, when you and a buddy said, listen, somebody needs to do something. And that somebody is us. Because everybody in America was saying, somebody needs to do something about this, but nobody in America had any solutions. And most of America didn't even feel like it was my responsibility. So can we go back into that conversation just a little bit more? What was it that caused you guys to say, I'm sick and tired of watching my buddies kill themselves? I am personally going to do something.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I think. I think when you get to a point where you're just tired of, I mean, it hurts. Um, it hurts to see your friends hurt like that, and it hurts to see their families hurt, with the destruction of everything that happens when somebody takes themselves out. And I think I don't know what, I don't know. I don't really know, because it's almost like we never really had a big conversation around it. It just sort of, I kind of feel like, for whatever reason, we were just, at that time in our lives, something was calling on us to say, hey, like, you guys need to step up and try to do something, and um, we all, when we started this whole thing, I mean, I've told this to so many people. I said, look, if we save one person's life,
Yes, absolutely.
it's worth everything we've done.
Yeah. All
And
the blood, sweat, and tears, right?
the amount of people that have called in to our tiny little organization that does this one crazy thing to say, I didn't kill myself because of you guys. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
the day that I stepped off the boat, I could barely walk, you know, and I was handed a phone, and I answer the phone, and it's this lady, and she says, "Hey, my husband, who I've never met ever, I don't even know who this
Yeah.
person uh, is alive today because of you."
Wow.
It was like, I mean,
That makes all the pain worth it
you
right
can't
there.
ask for any more than that,
Yeah.
you know,
No.
and to me, it was like, mission complete, right?
Yeah.
This did something, I mean, it did something for all of us personally, but like it did something to affect other people. And,
Yeah.
I mean, we've set up other programs since then, to help other people out, but, it's, I don't know. I don't really know, like back then, with me and Alex and that conversation we were having, like, it, it's one of those situations where you're talking with a friend, and it's like both of you are emotional and angry, and like I said, kind of blaming, and I don't know if it's because of who we are. I don't know if it's, military wise or whatever, but it just got to a point real quickly that I don't want to talk about other people that should be doing this. I don't want, like I'm, I'm capable, I'm capable to help. So let me help, and that's kind of just how it, and I don't know, it was kind of quickly went that way without a lot of thought, really.
You you sound just like my friend Doug Schuster, who served in the Ranger Regiment with me. And Doug and I were having lunch a while back. This has been quite a while now. And Doug and I were both angry with the amount of buddies that had taken their own life. And Doug said essentially the same thing you did. Like, the worst part, Jeff, is I didn't even know that it was that bad. I knew that they were struggling, but everybody's struggling. And then the next phone call I get, it's too late. It's over. And Doug made this statement to me. And Doug, if you're listening, huge shout out to you. Doug said, I'm going to start calling, and I'm just going to start randomly calling buddies, and I'm going to just let them know, hey, I'm thinking about you right now and I'm available. And if you need to talk, I'm here. Because I don't know how bad it is if you don't tell somebody how bad it is. And I was like, Doug, I think you're onto something, man. Because I really do think there are some guys that are really struggling. And the bond in the military, especially the bond when people have been through the fires of combat and really dangerous, hard training, that bond gets so deep. But if you don't have a brother like that or a sister like that to call right away or to reach out to, it's easy to go down a bad road and just feel alone and isolated. And then pretty soon you don't want to live anymore. So I want to tell you, thank you for doing something practical to make a difference. And I can't even imagine how emotional that phone call must have been. Not only did you just actually make it to dry land on the opposite side of the Atlantic, but to hear some lady say, you saved my husband's life. Man, I can't imagine how that must have felt.
Yeah, it was interesting. Sometimes I don't know. What's crazy is I didn't. I mean, that was amazing, and and it felt really good. But it was probably 2 months after I rode, after we completed that, and I'll never forget because I was sitting eating breakfast one morning, and I just like broke down out of nowhere, and my wife was like, "What? Are you all right? Like, what's going
Are
on with
you
you?" And
okay? Like,
I
are
was
you
just like,
losing it?
it just sort of all sunk in, like
Yeah.
everything that we've just done, and it was kind of overwhelming, at that point. But um,
Well, I want to get to what happened to you in the middle of the Atlantic. Because honestly, what you guys did is mind blowing. I can't imagine the training, let alone the hardships that you guys went through getting to the Atlantic. But before we actually get to middle of the Atlantic and there's some moments where your life is impacted forever, it's not just veteran suicide for you. I mean, for you, this is a really personal thing. Every veteran that I know has many, not one, but many friends that have taken their life. In fact, when I'm in audiences now, I say, is there anybody in this room that doesn't know multiple people that have taken their life? And there's not one hand that goes up. But in your case, man, this goes back farther than the military, right? So for just a few minutes, let's talk about, kind of your childhood, your relationship with your dad, and how your relationship with your dad, kind of some of your last days with your dad.
Sure. Yeah. So, my dad he was a brilliant man. It's crazy because, I wish that I could chat with him today, just about like, just pick his brain on stuff because of things that I remember and people that I've talked to since, everything. But as a kid, my dad was just like this incredible person, right? He was owned his own house, contracting business, and they built all these homes in Washington State, and he's like my hero, and we fished all the time, and he used to take me hunting all the time. And when I was a little bit, I mean, I wasn't that old, probably, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. My dad started going from Washington State to Wyoming to guide hunters, up in like the Jackson Hole area. And him and my mom decided that they were going to move out to Cody, Wyoming, of all places, so that he could kind of pursue, things that he wanted to do out here. So we moved to Cody when I don't know, I think I was 6 years old. And um, and as a child, like, growing up before I was a teenager, I mean, you know, that all kind of continued. I mean, we fished and we hunted together, and and but it's weird because I remember those moments so much more than any other moments really with my father, because we just did so much stuff outdoors together, and he he was the first person in my life to um, kind of forced me to gut it out, I guess.
All
Like,
right.
because, going up in the mountains when you're a kid, and it's freezing cold outside and it's miserable and you're
It's
hungry.
miserable.
And,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
my dad was always just like, you need to toughen up, and like, not in a negative way, but like
Right.
just pushing me to, just, it doesn't last forever, right? Nothing lasts forever, and keep that in your head. And, but as I got a little older, I kind of, yeah, I was a wild child. I'm the middle kid in my family. Like, I partied all the time. School was never really that important to me. I did okay only because I tested good. If it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have made it through. But my dad and I didn't know this at the time, obviously, but him and I, really started to kind of butt heads about a whole bunch of stuff. And I know that's fairly normal and natural for a lot of teenagers and their parents, but it got to a point where we just like I just didn't want to be around him anymore. I mean, we didn't hunt anymore, we didn't fish anymore. Like, and at certain points throughout my teenage years, it was almost like my dad would it's like he would offer an olive branch every once in a while,
Yeah.
like he was trying to like repair that relationship. And looking back on that now, like I I realized that, but at the time, like I didn't want anything to do with it,
Sure.
and and so he became pretty hard on me. I mean, I mean, we didn't really talk much for a long time. And I grew up playing hockey too, and my dad was big into helping that whole thing. And in fact, my dad is like pretty much the main reason that Cody, Wyoming even has a hockey program. And but it's weird because I was I was a pretty good hockey player, but I could have been a lot better if I would have cared more. But I was good enough to be better than most, and so I just didn't really put that much effort into it. And my dad like constantly hammered me on that, because he was like, "Man, if you just tried a little harder, like, but you don't." And he's like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you don't have to put effort into it, but I couldn't stand that, it always like irked me. And anyway, I right around graduation, or just before my dad had even gone to the Army recruiter office and, talked to them about some stuff. And it was probably 2 weeks after I graduated that I met up with him in town in the parking lot, actually, of like a grocery store, which is by the recruiter office. And he had just come out of there for a second time or something. And I didn't even know he was doing this, but he came up to me and he was giving me a hard time about, what are you going to do with your life? And like, like all these things. And he was like, I don't even think you can make it into the Army. Like you're just, you're too messed up, you're too wild and you're too messed up and all this stuff. And, you know, that moment in my life, that day was kind of an interesting, I've held on to that for a long time. Because I told my dad, I was like, I don't ever think I want to see you again. Like we'd be better off if you were just not even around us. And, it wasn't more than a few days later that, I got home like way late at night, it's summertime. So I'm out with my friends. I get home. It's probably, I don't know, 11, 12 o'clock at night, maybe later. My mom's asleep. My brother's asleep. My sister's off in college. And I just got home, and this lady, and we live like 16 miles out of town, up in the mountains. And so this lady pulls up our really long driveway, and she gets out, and she's wearing like a windbreaker, so she's like like what an ATF agent or FBI agent would be wearing. And I was like, can I help you? And she was like, well, I need to see your mom. And I said, no, my mom's asleep. Like, what do you need? Why are you at my house this late? And she said, well, and she wouldn't tell me. And I kept, kind of pushing her. And finally she was like, well, your dad is dead. And I was like, what? And she's like, and I'm like, how did he die? And she was like, he committed suicide. And I just remember like my whole, I don't even know how to explain it, but it was just like instantly the only thing I could think of is everybody else, how this is going to affect my mom, my sister, my brother, everybody, like that's what hurt me in a weird way. I mean, I hadn't had time to like think about my father and like all that situation yet. And I just remember, just the pain that caused my family was just unbelievable. My mom's mom committed suicide when my mom was like 18, 19 years old. And,
your poor mother,
so
man.
my mom is like, dude, she's like my hero though. I mean, my mom is like, an unbelievable lady. But so, when that happened, it's kind of interesting, because I just buried it, I just pushed it down as far as it could go and didn't really think about it. But it wasn't until many years later that I kind of realized that as much as I tried to like push that down and bury it, it really affected choices that I made, and things that I did. My brother played professional golf. He was on tour. He was a professional golfer, and he won a golf tournament and quit, which is like the craziest thing, right? As a professional golfer, he worked his whole life to get there, and he quits. And I was already out of the military. I just got back home. My brother quits and comes back home, and I was like, what are you doing here, man? Like, why would you come back here? You're on this, I mean, he's so good. And he's like, well, I'm just done. I'm just tired of it. And he wouldn't say anything. He would never tell me. And 2 years later, I finally get him to go out on the golf course because he wouldn't play any, like he was done. He, put in the closet. I get him out there. We're out playing golf. And I was like, man, you got to tell me, like, why did you quit playing golf? And he said, well, when I was playing juniors and dad was still alive, he never would go to any of my golf tournaments. And so our mom would always take my brother to the golf tournaments. Well, one time she couldn't go, so my dad had to go. Him and my brother got into some argument during this because of some rule or whatever at the golf tournament. And essentially my dad, like, this is probably a 8 hour drive from our house where this golf tournament's at. So the whole way back, my brother's telling me that, dad is just telling me like, you know, you're never going to be good enough to play. Like, this is not something that, this is something you do with your friends on the weekend. Like, just kind of laying it on him. And Gabe was a little kid, and so when my dad died, Gabe just like flipped a switch that I am going to prove to this man who's no longer here that I can do this. And the interesting thing about that is I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I never thought that anybody else in my family had that same problem because I've done things in my life. The military is one of those things
Yeah. Yeah.
where it was just like, I told you I could do this.
When
And
you
not
said
only
you'd
could I
never
do it,
make it
but
in the
I'm
army.
doing all
Yeah.
of these other things,
Sure.
and so, but that dealing with that, it's just, I don't know. I've always been very sensitive to like suicide, people with suicide issues and things like that, because I've been through it. And another thing that happened to me, I was injured training wise in the military, not combat related. And at the time, like the Army, I don't, they didn't really have the same protocols, I guess you could call it, like when it came to like taking medication and all that kind of stuff. So I was given a ton of medicine, and this is like midway through my Army career. Um, and it was insane because, I mean, yeah, it was helping my physical pain, but like mentally, I just kind of turned into I didn't feel, I just like kind of all that was just going away. So all this mental stress, that you're going through, combat related things and stuff like that. I never worked through any of that. I mean, it just was sort of there, but I was just numb to it. And it wasn't until after the military, and I'd struggled with that kind of on and off for a little while, that once I got like over that situation, I realized that the one thing that I always told myself that I will not ever do what my dad did. I will never hurt people like that. I was actually doing it to myself, just in a
Yeah.
very slow way,
Right.
and that changed things for me. I
Right.
realized like, man, like, you know, I don't know. So, but I don't
Oh
know. But
man, you're talking about just a few episodes ago, I interviewed Tommy Parker, who was a Marine that got blown up and a triple amputee, and they threw drugs at him, and basically he became a zombie and was in and out of prisons for years, and would steal and do whatever he had to do for more pain pills that led to to hard drugs that led to a heroin addiction. Then he met a woman at
yeah,
a gas station that moment turned his life around, because it was the moment that he realized, like, I'm it is my fault my life is where it is right now, and I'm hurting a lot of people. And Beau, what you just described, you know what suicide does better than most, even guys like me who have many, many buddies who have taken their own life. I've seen the hurt, but I've never felt it like you have, because your father took his life, and really took his life not long after you said, listen, man, I'm done with you and don't really want to have much more to do with you. So the way I want to kind of bring this story to a close is, let's go back to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean now. And you got some hard rowing to do inside yourself. Notice what I just did there. For everybody who's listening, I'm going to say that one more time. This is no longer about you against the ocean. This isn't you and a couple of buddies against the elements. This is you having some real work to do with you. And I'd like to just give you some time to talk about what happens to you personally, on
sure.
that boat in the middle of the Atlantic, and how it really did impact you and maybe even make you into a better man.
Sure. Well, and you would know this, Jeff, because of military experiences and stuff. But the crazy thing about rowing across the ocean is it doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how fit you are, how prepared you think you are. About a week in, maybe less, your body is toast. Like
Yeah.
the only thing that's driving you to continue is what's in between your ears, you know? And
Yeah.
so that,
Every Ranger School student knows what you're
yeah,
talking about right now.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and it just becomes like you against yourself the whole time, you know? And with that comes a lot of other interesting things that come up, you know,
Yeah.
because you're working so hard, you're fighting so hard to just keep going that I think you just have moments, you know, it's like you almost have moments, or at least, you know, I do. And rowing the ocean is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's happened to me a few other times in my life too, where you just have like I don't know, like it's like clarity for a second or something,
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
something comes over you and it's like, wow. So, you know, with my dad, I was sitting in the middle of I mean, we were probably 1,500 miles out in the middle of the ocean. And I just, I just felt like I had to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Got to get this out, right? Like in the middle of the ocean, I got to deal with this and I can't keep stuffing it down any longer,
Hmm.
which is where a whole lot of people who are listening to this episode are right now because they've been stuffing it down and trying to keep their life busy and keep themselves preoccupied so that they don't have to deal with it. But when you're 1,500 miles from the nearest landmass, there's nothing out there but you having to deal with you. Sorry to interrupt, man. Go for it.
No, you're good. I mean, it's just, you know, I needed that, you know. I had thought about that last conversation I had with my dad so many times. And even though I'll never be able to tell him that in person, and even though there's so many things that technically my father should apologize to me for,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Sure.
still had a part of something that I needed to let it go, you know, like my side of this, I cleaned up my side of the street in that situation. And it took me many, many, many years to get there, but I finally got there.
Man, if there's anything that I love about your story, and you're the perfect guest for the Unbeatable podcast, Beau. And it's not Fight or Die, the nonprofit and what you're doing helping other people. It's you getting to the point that you realize I got to work and I got to do some hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. Not fighting this boat, not fighting the weather, not fighting the ocean. I got to do some hard work to get healthy again on the inside. And anybody who's ever been where you are knows that junk ain't easy. In fact, a lot of people are simply so overwhelmed by how hard the work is to get emotionally, psychologically, I would say, maybe even you would agree, spiritually healthy, that a lot of people will never get there. They just quit because it's so hard.
Hmm.
And they let their past or their emotions beat them, literally.
Right.
And what you're saying is, I won't be beat by my emotions. I won't be beat by the ocean. I won't be beat by my past or the mistakes that I made with my relationship with my dad. I'm going to do the hard work. And even if it takes me years and years, I'm going to keep doing the hard work until I can get healthy on the other side of it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's pretty much how I live my life, you know, and that's ocean rowing is no different, you know, all that stuff. And what we try to talk to people about is if you just don't give up, you know, um, things don't always happen in the timeline you think they will. And things happen just like that situation that did to me in the middle of the ocean. I wasn't like consciously trying to do that at some point in my life. It
Yeah.
just happened, you know, and but it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been constantly striving to try to work harder, you know, work more towards being the person that I want to be. And that doesn't stop, you know, it's not like that happened. And then things are, you got to work at your life
Yeah.
every day for the rest of your life.
Bo, I don't know if you can do this, but I'm gonna put you on the spot, man. You rode hard road to get across that ocean, but you also did some hard rowing inside. And if you can, the guys or the gals that are listening to this episode right now that are right now where you were, could you give them an idea of what happened, what you look like, what was different for you on the opposite side of the ocean when you finally got out of the boat? And I'm asking you this question to give them some hope, because they know I got nothing but hard work in front of me and I don't even know if I have what it takes. And Beau's telling me don't quit, but I'm saying I don't know if I can even make it through this ugly past or the big mistakes or the huge challenges that are in front of me. So, with the last couple of minutes, can you describe the man you were before you started rowing and the man that you were when you got out of the boat? And if it's even possible, can you tell us what was different? Because I want people to say, okay, maybe I don't ever row across the Atlantic, but I'm going to do the hard work that Beau did, because I want to get to the place that Beau got to when he got out to the other side of the boat. Not to say that your life was better and it's all been, unicorn farts ever since you got out of that boat, but I want people to have something to reach for, have something to row hard towards.
That's a tough question. I This might not make sense with what you're asking, but every single thing that I've done is kind of building on the last thing that I've done, and that's good and bad, right? I mean, because things ebb and flow. You have your down times and your up times, um, but when I started that row, I think I don't know. I was. I think the change for me started much
Sure.
earlier than the actual start line of the row. I think when we started it really started for me, when I started to kind of work on myself. But when Alex and I decided to go do this and we started, that moment really, just little pieces at a time, it was like, I started doing this, they call it service work in a lot of areas. I started doing this for other people, and slowly but surely, I just noticed that, man, I feel a little lighter. I'm sleeping a little better. Like I'm just happier. Like for no reason. For no reason, I just feel kind of more at peace. And I would, I would say that again. I think it took me probably almost 2 months after I got off the road for that to really like settle in. But I think I don't know how it really, it's hard for me to like distinguish a moment in a moment, but the moment that I was sitting there at the breakfast table and just kind of was like overwhelmed with emotion, I I think in a way like that was me feeling more than I've ever felt before, because
Wow.
I had done something so powerful that it, and don't get me wrong, I mean, that could be anything for anybody. It doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be rowing across an ocean or climbing Mount Everest or doing some crazy thing. But all I can say is that, and I always tell people this, like, I promise you that if you stick to, like, if you fight and stick this through, like whatever it is that you might be struggling with, you're gonna fail. You're gonna have backward steps. You're
Yeah.
gonna have
Oh
things that
yeah.
happen to you that set you
Yeah.
back. But if you never let that keep you back and you just keep grinding and going forward, you'll have those moments. You might be overcome with emotion. Who knows what it'll be for you specifically, but you'll feel like I just like made it to the next level in my life somehow, and it's because I didn't stop. And um, I'm still I'm still having moments like
Of
that. I
course.
mean, there's other things that have come up since then that are like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like that's just mind blowing to me. That I don't. That probably didn't answer your question very
No,
well.
man. In fact, I don't know if you've ever been asked that question before, but you just answered it beautifully. I wasn't talking about the physical start point and the physical end point of the race. I was actually talking about the kind of guy that you were months or years before you got in that boat and the kind of guy that you became months or years after getting out of the boat. And the way that you described it, I wrote those words down while you were talking, man. You started to feel lighter. You started to sleep better. You started to be happier. And I'm saying, who on the planet doesn't want some of that? But what you just basically described it as feeling more. And what I wrote down is I think what Beau is saying is I started to live more after I got out of that boat than I was living before I got in the boat. Still breathing, still taking up the same amount of space on planet Earth, but I just had a much more to my life afterwards, which is the reason why anybody who's facing right now what you are facing should do the hard work and fight or die so that they can get to the point where they're living more after the fact. Dude, I could go on in this interview. I really could for about 3 hours because I love everything I'm hearing from you. But I want people to know more about you. So definitely there are people that are intrigued about what you did. How can they find out more about this, the race across the Atlantic? But more importantly, how do they find out more about Fight or Die?
Yeah, for sure. So, we're on all the social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. But our website is usvetrow.org. So if you go on there, there's all sorts of links about what we're doing. And like I said, we just had a team last night. Our all ranger team just finished in Antigua, which is super
Tell
awesome.
those
They're
bros we're
doing
very
great.
proud of them. Please do
Um,
that.
Craig, one of the guys, Craig, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But he
Yeah.
essentially got a static line injury. But I mean, not jumping out of a plane, but like his safety harness on the boat wrapped around his arm. He got thrown off. Boat went one way, he went the other way.
Uh,
Tore his bicep.
oh
It's
my
been like
goodness.
that
While he was
for
on the boat,
while he's on. He got tossed off, halfway through the race. He's been hanging in there, I mean, it's awesome because one of the things that like because we did a call with him. I didn't personally, but I know Evan Stratton did, one of our other guys, and on the sat phone, and he's like, they're not taking me off this boat. Like I'm not
all
quitting.
right.
So
That's what I'm
so
talking about.
he's got to get rushed to the hospital, I think tomorrow, to get surgery because he's
Yeah,
has
to
a torn
fix this
bicep.
arm that's been jacked
Yeah.
up for months.
But he wouldn't quit, and that's
Yeah,
just those are the kind of people that I don't know. We kind of attract that, I guess, and it's a great
yeah,
thing. Yeah, US Vet Row is, like I said, has all of our links. We do. You can sign up for mental health first aid courses on our. We offer those free to people, um, and um, and we also have a grant program where we essentially give money to students that are training to be military psychologists or psychiatrists. So so grad students, we give them money for school if they're going
yeah.
to go into
Nice.
to help mental health for veterans. So those are kind
If
of
you're
things that we
driving
do.
right now and you missed that address, we're going to put it in the notes to this episode. But if you're watching and you want to write this down, usvetrow.org, and you can find out some more awesome information there. But man, it's cool what you guys are doing to help students as well as, to try to make a difference. I love what you guys stand for. I love what Fight or Die is doing right now, man. Thank you
Yeah,
for being on this episode with me.
yeah. And last thing I would say too is to anybody, is just don't be afraid to say something. I mean, um, I think that's one of the biggest barriers, biggest hurdles for anybody to get through is that they're ashamed or they don't, whatever it might be that's going on inside you, like that prevents you from having that conversation. And Jeff, you probably would relate to this, but it's like going on a 12-mile, 20-mile ruck march and you're in the middle of it and you're like, I'm gonna quit. And you look ahead of you and you're like, well, that guy's not quitting, so
That's
I'm not
right.
gonna quit yet.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of it and you talk to your friends and they're like, "Oh, dude, I was thinking about quitting the
I
whole time." You
almost
thought you
quit,
were the
but
only one.
I watched you, right?
Right. You thought you were
Yeah.
the only person that is suffering like that. You're not. So that's the
Yeah,
point, is that if you start talking about it, you'll find out that
it's true.
you're not alone. And that not feeling alone is going to help open up the door to get started on getting help, right? To start growing and fixing what you have going on.
Beau, we're 126 episodes into this podcast, and what you're saying right now is what guests have said almost every other episode. We probably said this more than 50 times since this podcast started, and it is, if you're struggling, don't it. The really strong guy or gal is the one who's quick to say, "I'm struggling, I need help." Don't hold it in. Don't try to figure it all out yourself. Help, let somebody else know you're struggling. And if you do that, you can be unbeatable too. So, man, thank you for that challenge. And dude,
Absolutely.
again, thanks for all you're doing for veterans. Thanks for all you're doing to help make the world a better place. And thanks for being on this episode.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I love everything that I just heard from Beau. Man, I could not think of somebody who has better described the reason for this podcast than Beau Maier and the Fight or Die Foundation that they started. He really is onto something. That when you are facing hardships, you can stuff it down, you can try to run away, you can keep yourself busy or try to avoid it. But the bottom line is, at some point, you're going to have to do the blood, sweat, and tears hard work of getting healthy. And that means either you fight it and you beat it, or eventually those challenges will beat you. So if you want to be unbeatable, thank you for tuning in to this incredible story from Beau Maier. And thank you, by the way, for staying connected with this Unbeatable podcast. If you just listened to this first episode ever of this podcast and you're like, "I love what I heard, I want to hear more like this," well, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button on YouTube or on all of those audio channels that we're on, and follow along, or go back and listen to some pretty amazing guests like Tommy Parker just a few weeks ago. And by the way, if you want regular details all week long, why don't you go ahead and connect with us on social media? We're pretty much everywhere. Just search for @Unbeatable Podcast, and you'll find us on almost all of the social media sites. You'll also find people out there like Gildo Alfredo Chihuahua, who is the guest of the week. And if I mispronounce your name right now, Gildo, I'm totally sorry. But I want to just say thank you for being so active. Thank you for being so engaged online. Thank you for staying connected with other people that are part of the Unbeatable audience. The ultimate in getting connected to us and letting us get connected to you is, why don't you go ahead and join the Unbeatable Army? It's our totally free list where we send out information and stay connected with you directly in your inbox all week long. If you want that, there's no strings attached. There's no, hidden agenda here. Just simply go over to unbeatablearmy.com. And next week, I look forward to bringing you another guest with another incredible story. So I'll see you right back here next week.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.